Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we begin with Forewords and Prefaces from Mystic Masonry, or the Symbols of Freemasonry and the Greater Mysteries of Antiquity by J.D. Buck. A few rudimentary lessons in architecture, a few universally admitted maxims of morality, a few unimportant traditions, whose real meaning is unknown or misunderstood, will no longer satisfy the earnest inquirer after Masonic truth. The late Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma. Dedicated to the universal brotherhood of humanity, its heroes, martyrs, and sages in the past, and to its servants in the present. Frontispiece. The audio is taken from the second edition, while the video is from the fifth edition. Forward to the third edition. The spirit of unrest is in the air. On the surface of things today, commercialism most often and most loudly claims attention. Great combinations of capital and the massing of millions seems the order of the day. Within the body politic, organization and cooperation is being tried on a scale never before recorded in the history of man, and economic problems are being tested in a way that cannot help adding immensely to the combined experience of mankind. What the final outcome may be, only the wisest could now say, and perhaps only the foolish would venture to predict. But human nature is essentially a stable product, and can be relied on in any event. Deep in the heart of man lies the principle of justice and equality, and no abuse that selfishness and greed can devise can long have any permanence. We may be far from the universal reign of brotherhood, but there is something deep down in the heart of man that continually strives toward it. Potent as is all this commercial unrest and economic strife, other problems are equally up for solution. Using the term in its broadest sense, the psychic problem keeps pace with the economic. Ethics and economics are inseparable. The conduct of the individual and the use of the resources of life and the distribution of wealth always involve both ethics and economics. In short, constitute them. Outside the churches and religious literature, we hear less about religion nowadays. Indeed, many otherwise good people seem to think religion obsolete, a thing of the past, a survival, where indeed it is admitted to have survived at all, of the Dark Ages. No greater mistake could possibly be made. The surface problems may have changed. Organizations may have broken up or disappeared. But the vital issues not only remain, but were never more in evidence than today. Nor can it be otherwise so long as the ecclesiastical nature of man remains unchanged. Only the imbecile or the degenerate can ignore the religious element in his own nature, if he tries. Just as inevitably as water seeks its level, and ultimately finds its way to the sea, does man feel after power, called by whatsoever name, whose divine ray makes him man, and whose indwelling presence lifts him beyond sordid self, and beckons his soul towards the higher, the larger, the better, as by the touch of wings. This is a universal experience, equally known to the savage and the civilized, and entirely independent of theologies or ecclesiasticism. Theologians in all ages have seized hold of this common human experience and formulated and endeavored to guide it, and have often exploited it, just as capitalists have dealt with economic problems in the resources of nature and the distribution of wealth. This is, broadly speaking, the psychic problem, constituting the religious element in the life of man. It was never more manifest than it is today. This it is that now runs pari passu with commercialism. And while, as already said, it may make less noise, it is everywhere in evidence. Every problem in the life of man and every moment that affects society is, in the last analysis, a psychic problem. One and all, they concern the body and its environments incidentally, and the soul essentially. The progress made in physical science in the last half-century is so remarkable that it is difficult to find an adjective suitable with which to designate it. Hence, the economic problems already referred to are necessarily to be revised. While the psychic problems have come into equal prominence, no such organized results can be pointed out as in the economic experiments. The race, as a whole, has been gathering facts and making experiments. The working hypothesis in psychology has seldom been suggested. At any rate, there is no large or general agreement as to any theorems. There seems to be no designs on the trestle board, and the workmen, the legions, are in confusion. The great majority of people, even among the educated and intelligent, will make haste to deny that this psychic theorem has ever been known to man, that it could ever have been discovered and then lost or concealed, is to them preposterous. Yet the whole of the traditions and symbolism of Masonry cluster around this theorem. This working hypothesis in the psychical life of man, it is the one thing needed to bring order out of confusion in the psychic problems that interest so many at the present time. The great secret, this master's word, was known to and preserved in the mysteries of antiquity, and is embodied and preserved in the traditions and symbols of Masonry today. This fact has been repeated in the body of this little book, the real purpose of which was to set students, and particularly Masonic students, to searching for the real secret. It is the reward of study and devotion, and has never been obtained on any other terms. It has never been conferred in the ritualistic degrees of the lodge, and never will or can be. It is the establishment of understanding in the soul of man between the higher self in him and the more and the beyond self, from which he draws his life, and from which his intuitions spring. This is real initiation, becoming at one-ment. The author is both gratified and encouraged at the reception accorded and the interest manifested in this little book, and the commendations received from many quarters. That it could become in any broad sense popular, he never for a moment imagined. It is too serious and void of sensationalism for that. In entering now on its 3,000, it has already exceeded any expectation of the author, who will be profoundly gratified if he may aid, though it be but a little, in increasing respect entertained by the community at large for the order of Freemasonry, and encourage his brother Masons to seek more light. I believe nowhere amongst men today can there be found so near an approach to the ideal brotherhood of man as in the Masonic lodges. Perfect it is not, and cannot be till human evolution is completed. Among the hundreds of thousands of Masons today in the United States, it would be difficult to find one who does not strive his best to exercise charity and loving kindness, particularly towards his brothers in the lodge. There are thousands of Masons, moreover, who realize that Masonry contains and implies far more than appears in the ritual and ceremonies of the lodge. There is a very widespread and growing interest in this direction. And it is this that Mystic Masonry, above all else, is designed to foster, encourage, and help. Indeed, the growth of this feeling in the past decade is remarkable, and the present writer has not a shadow of doubt as to the result. It is the ethical precepts inculcated in the lodge and so largely practiced by the craft, more than all else, that open the higher intuitions of man, and so enable him to grasp and finally comprehend the higher problems concealed in the profound symbolism of Masonry. Modern Masonry is thus fast becoming, like its ancient prototype, a school of the mysteries, the real mystery being the origin and nature of the human soul, and the transcendent and immortal destiny of man. The Masonic organization is so large, so widespread, so strong, its spirit so fraternal, its teaching so helpful and inspiring, that it seems destined to achieve the most glorious results in the encouragement and uplifting of the whole human race. The hard and fast lines that have heretofore segregated mankind are rapidly disappearing. Creed and dogma have lost their hold since the state no longer protects them, and the anathemas of ecclesiastics are no longer feared. Men and women of all classes are coming into closer touch with the avowed purpose of understanding. In order that they may help each other, it is more and more recognized that the good of one is the welfare of all. The sin of separateness is thus slowly being undermined. Hence, the ethical, the religious, the economic, and the political problems are seen to be practically inseparable, and all definitely related in the one problem of the higher evolution of man. This recognized unity of knowledge and community of interest is the prelude to the universal brotherhood of man that is the ideal state and the dream of every true philanthropist throughout the ages. Masonry stands for just this and all this. Just as for ages the Great Mysteries clearly defined and promulgated the philosophy which makes such an ideal state, such a great republic of nations and peoples possible. It must be founded on a knowledge of man's entire nature and cemented by loving kindness towards each and all. Then can it only exist and endure. To promote this glorious result is the sole purpose of this little book. This is indeed the work of the Lodge, as it should be of every frater throughout the world, till in the end it is the work of every individual. Cincinnati, January 1903. Preface to the second edition. That a second edition of this little book should be called for within 6 weeks of the date of issue is, perhaps, the best answer to the inquiry in the mind of its author as to what kind of reception so serious a view of modern Masonry, and so high an estimate of ancient mysteries, as is herein set forth, might receive. It has not only attracted attention and excited inquiry, but met the unqualified approval of certain high Masons. Sir Albert Pike's greatest work, restricted to the members of the craft, obtained but 150 subscribers. If Mystic Masonry quadrupled this subscription list before the date of publication, the reason is to be sought, not in the superior quality of the book, but in the more popular form in which the subject is handled, in the removal of all restrictions as to subscribers, and still more, from the fact that a widespread interest has of late arisen in regard to these subjects, offering, as the author believes, the grandest opportunity presented to real Masonry for more than 1,000 years, for presenting its sublime philosophy to the world for the uplifting of humanity. Mystic Masonry is, to a considerable extent, a compilation. It was not the author's purpose to become an innovator, but rather, in a modest way, an inspirer and renovator. And for this purpose he but repeated statements that had already been made by those high in Masonic authority, statements that had been overlooked or forgotten, and that needed to be remembered. In his preface to Morals and Dogma, Mr. Pike declares that about 1/2 of that work is original matter, and half taken from various sources, and that he was writing neither for fame nor money, but for the benefit of the craft. The source of what he had sat down was a matter of secondary importance. He often adapted rather than quoted, and in many places and very seldom gave authorities. He wrote those things which he evidently believed his Masonic brotherhood ought to know, and as he divested his mind from all selfish motive or hope of gain, so must he be exempt from the charge of plagiarism. He drew very largely in many places from the writings of Abbe Constant, better known as Eliphas Levi, whose writings then existed only in the French language, and which undoubtedly contained the most profound knowledge of the occult sciences and the ancient mysteries given to the world since the days of the old initiates. As the present author has observed, in the body of this book, it matters far less whence these truths have been derived than what they really mean. Although no reader is bound to accept the interpretation put upon them by any writer or commentator, yet every intelligent inquirer may discern their general reasonableness, the logical sequence of the whole as revealing a profound philosophy of nature and of life, and the beneficent influence they must exert if universally diffused and generally adopted amongst men. Liberty and equality based on fraternity may have degenerated into a slogan of blood in the days of the French Revolution, yet in more peaceful times Must such fraternity be interpreted as the ideal state and made to promote the universal and unqualified brotherhood of man? This is from the 3rd edition. Preface to 3rd edition. Symbolism. Symbolism began with the first communication of ideals among men. It is the outward sign of an inner concept, a word, an image, a gesture which tells, to the one who is of the inner circle, the story of a secret and often arbitrary association. No subject is more interesting or more comprehensive than the evolution of symbolism from the mist of prehistoric times to the established methods of keeping human records today. Primitive man worked out a very elaborate and complex system for the explanation of life and social intercourse. It is replete with symbolism. Inside the general circle of social structure, there are many smaller circles of secret societies, priestly, material, and political, which honeycomb every tribe and nation from the dawn of human time. Anthropologists, archaeologists, and all these students of man and nature from savagery to our higher civilization have filled the world with books that are the interpretations of symbols. It is a far cry from the rain-making ground of a Dyak medicine man to the prayers of a modern man of God for rain. But it is a study in symbolism that covers the range of human development. One of the most interesting and obscure phases of symbolism is the difference in meaning of symbols to those within and those without certain societies. This is the esoteric and exoteric phase of symbols. Masonry is probably the greatest society and fraternal structure in the world. It has taken much of its symbolism from the heritage of the ages, and much of it is very obscure even to the initiates. The present volume is the result of many years of study and research on the part of its scholarly author to explain the history of both the esoteric and exoteric interpretation of the mysteries of the craft. Its importance to Masons cannot be overestimated. Unveil, O thou that giveth sustenance to the universe, from whom all things proceed, to whom all must return, that face of the true sun, now hidden by a vase of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty on our journey to thy sacred seat. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.